So, welcome everyone, and welcome to the Women Who Code conference. I hope that everyone had a very good session. Since morning, we are having very and interactive sessions, and you must have had a very good lunch also. So that was a well-deserved break. So, welcome to this session. There we will be discussing about the develop consumable technology. So we always develop the technology, but that technology is consumable or not. That we should think from the requirement phase itself and going to the design and development phase. So in all the phases, we should think about it when we are developing a technology. So this is a panel discussion. We will be discussing about all these factors, and we'll be listening from our panelists that what are their perspective and thoughts on the same topic. So with this, let me welcome our panelists for the today's session. So first, I want to welcome Lalitha. So Lalitha is Senior Director in a Healthcare Solution India Private Limited. So welcome Lalitha. So a small
Thank you.
intro about Lalitha. She is an inspiring leader and detail-oriented technology executive with over 28 years of work experience in software products. She has built organizations from ground zero, traversed through the complete spectrum of the technology landscape, ranging from monolithic client-server software to cloud-based software as a service, and delivered high-quality enterprise software products across domains. In her current responsibility as executive of the India Consulting Services Organization, she leads the professional services projects for the implementation of the Millennium and Health Intent platform and products. Prior to Cerner, she worked at IBM for nearly 8 years and at Siemens for 12 years. She is currently volunteering with the NGO Anudip Foundation as their Goodwill Ambassador, striving her best to help in the placement of their trained students and also helping with fundraising through CSR programs and a variety of funding channels. She is an electronics engineering graduate from Bangalore University. So welcome again, Lalita.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here. Yeah, our second panelist is Misha Joshi, Sales Director, Microsoft Consulting Services. So Misha Joshi is a seasoned business leader with experience across sales, services, customer experience, digital and business transformational programs, and general management. She has worked with system integrators, has led a B2B telecom business at Vodafone India, and led the professional services at VMware India. Currently, she is Sales Director, Microsoft Consulting Services for India. With experience ranging from legacy to the latest, she has worked with worldwide customers and has a wide exposure across technologies, industries, field, and corporate roles. She is passionate about achieving business outcomes for customers through digital transformation. She also strongly believes in leveraging diversity of thought, gender, and demographic at the workplace. In addition to her day to day job, she mentors people and champions multiple initiatives in diversity and inclusion within and across organizations. Welcome, Misha. Your third panelist is Pallavi Srinivasa, Senior Director, Cisco. Pallavi Srinivasa is an industry veteran with over 20 years at Cisco in various leadership roles in areas of product management, technical marketing, and sales across two regions, US and APJ. She loves it when customers explain their most pressing problems and she can help solve them. In spite of not being a code geek, it still fascinates her how we can connect the internet with few lines of code to make magic happen. Seeing the technology we develop being used to improve service at places like airports, hospitals, and banks is extremely satisfying. Most recently, Pallavi has been leading Cisco business portfolio. Outside of Cisco responsibilities, Pallavi is also very active in mentoring STEM programs and startup accelerators, influencing business and diversity of leadership in technology companies. Welcome, Pallavi. Now we have next panelist as Rachil Chandran, Director CMBU, VMware India. Rachil is currently Director of R&D at VMware, where he leads a cloud observability portfolio. Rachil has a decade plus experience in building software for private cloud operations and capacity management. Over the past few years, he has been leading his teams into hybrid and public cloud space, simplifying customers' observability across infra and apps. Rachel has extensive experience building low latency, high throughput distributed systems, shipping them both in shrink wrapped and SaaS form factors. Rachel is passionate about solving tough problems across the spectrum of software development, technology, business, product, and organizational. He is also passionate about mentoring and believes that the key to sustained success of an organization is the growth of the individuals. Rachel considers a net reward check he received many years ago as one of his biggest achievements. Welcome, Rachel. Happy to have you here. And with that is I want to welcome our moderator for today's session. So Sridhar TR is a director, product management, Mavenir. T.R. Sridhar is currently working with Mavenir as a director, product line management in the RAN BU. Prior to this, he has contributed to the growth of various organizations, including VMware, Dell EMC, and Nokia over his career spanning 22 years. For the last 15 years, he has built this strategy and helped grow the business in product management roles across these companies. He has extensive experience in radio access networks, radio intelligent controller, containers and automation, cloud platforms, operational support systems, transport in the telecom industry. He is actively involved in keeping up abreast of cutting edge deep learning research and visualizing machine learning and deep learning in both industry and academic circles. He is on the board of studies of multiple colleges. In his spare time, he is also involved in many voluntary activities related to girl child education and nature conservation. So, welcome, Sridhar. Happy to have all of you here. So, Sridhar, it's all yours now. So, stage is all yours. Sir. Please take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Neelam, for this wonderful introduction. And it is my privilege and probably all of our privilege to be part of the Women Who Code Connect India 2022 program and to be part of this panel titled Develop Consumable Technology. It's a great honor to be a moderator for this panel, and to this panel is having a diverse experts across various industries and various functions, and put together, I'm sure that we are going to decipher what it means to build consumable technology. So with this, let's get started. So among the audience, I understand there is a variety of people, students, professionals, people who have aspirations to probably create startups of their own, build products of their own. So with all this put together, let us start with the basic question: how do we build consumable technology? Uh, so when we look at products, we always see them. Somehow this product has come up. There's a fantastic product, but how did this product start? How did people decipher what requirements should be there? These are the questions which people grapple with. Even people who are building these products would like to relate to what technologies they are building. So with that in mind, let us get started. Lalitha, let me start with you. What does it mean for you for building a consumer technology? Where do we need to start? How do we need to go about it?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sridhar, for that question. I think there are many parameters to be considered, at the requirement stage itself, right? And who will use it, how will it be used, and keep in mind several aspects right from the stage of the design, like the security, the performance, the scalability, and all these aspects. But I think there are different parameters to keep in mind. I think Pallavi, from a product management experience, will be able to throw in a lot of light on that. But I just wanted to bring in one dimension, which I think is very important, which is when you design any product, I think API first has to be a design principle. Look at, like, if you're building any product or platform, it might not directly suffice the needs of a business. It can be very different on what each business or a domain wants. And designing a API first will be a fantastic thing for the consumers of that product or the platform, whatever that you're building, to go ahead and build their own applications which suits their business needs, right? Their own business workflows. I'll just share a couple of examples to elaborate on what I mean with this. It could be that, say, you have a platform which is providing a learning content, and you are, as a consumers, might actually be interested in integrating that with their LMS, learning management system. And then that's how they would consume your product or a platform. So providing that right kind of API becomes very critical. And if I take another example from a healthcare industry perspective, we build EMR, the big, huge platform to manage the whole medical records. Like, say, you build an electronic medical record system, but not every client might have the kind of applications or the feature set that they want for their business workflows. There again, providing the API is what makes that platform or product consumable. So using that API, they can go ahead build their own applications. It could be a handheld mobile application or any other kind of application that suits their business workflows, solves their business problems. So again, designing the API there comes into picture on how well they can consume it and then build upon their own applications on that. So that's just one dimension that I wanted to share. So Pallavi, do you want to add from your experience? What are the things that need to be considered beyond this at the requirement stage itself?
No, I think certainly you brought in a very valid point of looking at your customers. I think API first is a very valid point, but at the same time, it depends on the type of customer usage that you're seeing. So if I take the example of Cisco, where you're looking at either network infrastructure or you're looking at a platform, for collaboration, WebEx, or you're looking at a security platform. We never used to think of API first. And for main reason being customer usage was very much heavily on the platform itself. So we were very much focused on how do we expose the technology to them through the box itself. And then came a stage where people started integrating that with other applications, with their own applications. And it started with service providers and it slowly spread into other segments. So we started looking at the API. And then came a time when people said, and again, it's because of the type of workforce that comes into work. And we started seeing more emphasis on the right type of workflow on the management itself. People wanted to use mainly the use UI on the management or even a mobile app, depending on which platform I'm using. So it sort of changed its face as we moved along through the generation of our customers, from CLI heavy, who took really great pride in typing into the box directly and seeing magic happen, to the time where people just wanted to use my mobile app and just swipe up and down and make things happen. And then now we are going into a stage where AI ML can take over, and we can talk about that later. But that's the overall perspective that I can bring in.
No, that's great, Pallavi. So thank you for that. Lalitha, Pallavi, both of you are bringing in, keep the customer as the center of the development. Try to take the requirements out. That is the way to build a product. Rachil, do you want to add to this from your perspective, how you go about validating requirements, building to requirements? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sridhar. First of all, I agree, right, with what both Lalitha and Pallavi said. I think from a R&D perspective, when you look at requirements, right, requirements are written by humans. There might have been a lot of interviews to come, with customers and things like that to come up with requirements, industry studies, and all of that. But end of the day, when you have a bunch of requirements, it's very important to be inquisitive and curious, right, about those requirements. It's very important to ask questions. Sometimes when you do that, people tend to think, hey, the requirements are very clear. Why are so many questions coming? It's only when you do that, you cover many aspects of what could be. The person that wrote the requirement starts thinking more, right? So a trap that, at least from an R&D engineering perspective, people tend to get into is what I call as prototype fixation, right? If I tell you, try not to think about a blue cow in the next 10 seconds, immediately you think of a blue cow, right? So that's what requirements does to you. It's important also to consider, requirements tend to be functional. If we were to say, I want to build a tool for my kitchen, you'll think about the functions, right? In software, in this day and age, it's very important to think about requirements way beyond that. What are the SLAs? How much downtime can a software system take? We'll talk about scale. That's another aspect. security, is this going to be used in a very airtight kind of environment? Is it open to the internet? um, what's going to be in there, right? Is it if something bad happens, do people lose millions of dollars, or people just get annoyed, right? So things like that, we need to go really deep. And for this, what I call is requirements iteration. It's very important to do those iteration upfront, because if you miss something there, you guys know the shift left, right? If you find this problem much later, you'll have to redo a lot of the work. So that's my 2 cents on the topic.
Hey, Rachil, thank you very much for that. Misha, you want to add in how do you go about validating, prioritizing requirements? How do you go about looking at requirements overall?
So I'll give a perspective from a completely outside in approach. I haven't been into product development ever. Yes, I started as a developer, but now I'm into sales. I've done a little bit of a job as a customer as well. And I think the thing that I really like to present on this topic normally is think about the why. And this is something that one very senior CIO told me a couple of weeks ago, and it just reinforced what it is, like Rachel mentioned, like Lalitha and Pallavi mentioned. You may be integrating APIs, you may be not thinking of a blue cow, whatever, but why? Why are you doing it? What is the end user going to do with something? And so two things I'd say. One is think of the why and ask those questions. Just feel free to ask them. And the second is think of the timing of whatever you're trying to roll out, right? And I'll just take an example of a feature. I'm trying to book a ticket for myself, and an ad pops up. I'm not in a mood to look at the ad. I need to finish booking my ticket. So please, spare me that. And it'll come at you from various forums. It'll come at you from leadership, from marketing, from various other pressures that will say, okay, now do this. But I think it's important to understand why it needs to be done and why it needs to be done then, or why it needs to be developed in a particular way.
No, thanks, Misha. This is again a very important point you bring. Keep questioning the requirements. The customer may not articulate the requirements in a good way, and never is R&D directly getting those requirements. There are multiple layers coming in between by the time the requirements reach the development team. So asking the question why at every layer and validating the requirement becomes a very important point. Thanks for bringing that out. And Misha, you also touched upon this aspect about when do we need it, and when is the right time to do something. So let's go into this part of the conversation. What does it mean if when a customer gives a particular requirement and the organization pushes all aspects, right from the strategy, right from the development of it, to go and complete developing that particular aspect, versus there is an overall strategy which the company, the business unit, the product has. How do we balance out this part, the tactical versus the strategic aspect of it? And this time I will start with Pallavi. Pallavi, how do you look at this balancing act?
You're
Sorry,
on
Pallavi,
mute.
you're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry. There you go, consumable technology. This is, or a dumb user. Um, this is something that, balancing tactical and strategic. I can see all of you smiling. This is something we deal with on a daily basis. And especially Rachil, I think product management always comes to you, and this is a daily negotiation that keeps happening. But I think this is where we need to understand, what do you mean by strategy? Strategic requirements could be different for different companies based on, again, customers, right? This is a favorite thing about product management. It all depends. So I'll give you an example. This just takes me back to my early product management days, where we defined the heck out of a platform that we wanted to sell to enterprise customers, data center customers. It basically defines what goes into an ASIC, what goes into the board, what functionalities do we bring into the software. This gives us good revenue for across data center enterprise. And then we got stuck with USB port on that box. And I mean, this is, yes, you could say it's tactical, but at the same time, when when I look at the hardware, the entire hardware brings in a good amount of revenue with all the functionalities that I've defined. But if we don't take this USB issue into consideration, the customers may not be able to log in and load their images, may not be able to copy the images. Now, would you call this strategic or tactical? At the same time, there are some hardware issues that engineering has identified, and functionality level details. So, believe it or not, we made it a huge priority to address that. It even went to the highest of the leadership, and I was standing there thinking, we really didn't take a whole lot of time defining the whole requirements, but this USB is taking as much time as the others. So you have to look into what kind of tactical requirement that is. It could be something that probably breaks what customer considers as table stakes. It could be tactical, but it's something that they expect naturally from the platform. And same thing goes with, we deal with this on the software functionality level, day in and day out. And at that level, what we look for is it feeding into my strategic requirement, or is it a one-off that a large customer with a high revenue is requesting? If it's a third one where it's not a large customer, it's not high revenue impacting, we can always push it down the road. But if it's in that second bucket, that's when the conversation starts. And I'm sure Rachil can, attest to this. Engineering always has that extra bandwidth that we can always tap into. But that's sort of the framework that we always look at. Revenue, is it feeding into my strategic requirements? The third one is, this is something table stakes that customer would expect anyway when we ship the box.
Yeah, thanks, Pallavi. Thanks for that. As a product manager, it's one of the toughest jobs. On one side is sales and customer-facing people,
Yes.
and on the other side is engineering trying to define a strict priority. So, Misha, I'll take the liberty of going to you next on this question. How do you deal with strategy tactical? Is there anything called strategy and tactical in front of a customer? Or how do you look at it?
Look, I'll say something that can be very controversial, but it's a very Steve Jobs kind of philosophy. The customer doesn't know what they want.
Totally agree.
And the if I may say, the fire is on both sides, in the sense that we are thinking we want the requirement from the customer, and the customer is thinking I want a prescription from the expert. Okay, and both are waiting for information to flow between each other, and so in absence of that, you just throw something at each other and you get moving. And then there are those classic memes that everybody's seen around how it started and what it actually became, right? I will go back to what I initially said, and in my mind, that design thinking is very, very critical. Are we thinking outside in? Are we thinking about the why? And there was one very good thing that happened when I was working in VMware before this current job. Is there we had this program at a site level where there were projects running across multiple functions of the organization, and we brought together all the program managers of those and taught them how to do a business value analysis. Because the fact of the matter is, people may throw requirements at you, people may throw priorities at you, people may throw instructions at you. But if you are able to put the argument back by putting the business value of it, what is the return on investment? Why should we do this? Why should we do it now? Who will benefit from it? Then you can manage your leadership as well. But look at it this way, neither the customer nor the leadership has the time to sit down with you and workshop for 4 hours as to why you did something. Whereas if you go back with a crisp 10-minute pitch on here's why it should happen, here's why it should not happen, pros and cons, here's the business value it's going to generate, and here is why outside in it's going to make sense for the company, I don't see why anybody's going to say no. And same thing with customers, right? We go and present the value to them. There is very clear value. People know what it is going to achieve for them. Business automatically flows. and work automatically flows. So it's important to keep that balance and keep that outcome in mind. If it's outcome oriented and we come with a very strong point of view, people listen.
Yeah, that's a very strong point, Misha. Thanks for that. Keep the outcome, and not just our outcome, but what is the outcome mean to the customer in mind. I think that's a very valuable point. Rachil, over to you. Uh, I think of the two previous panelists were indirectly referring to you as the developing evangelist here to say, how do you deal with it? Customer is saying something, sales is saying something, product man is saying something. What does it mean, tactical versus strategic?
Yeah, no, first of all, I attest to both Pallavi and Misha what they said, right? They were looking for attestation, I attest it. Right? It's very real. It's not that the panelists are conspiring. This is what happens in the real world, and it's inevitable, right? So, look, for me, strategy means building for the future. The timeline could be different depending on the industry. If building software for an aeroplane is not the same as building some mobile app, right? But in their own context, there's a timeline planning for, and tactical means being more reactive, right? So the mantra here is plan for the best strategically and prepare for the worst, right? Tactically, easy to say, very hard to do, and to me, a lot of this depends on, it's already covered. You'll see overlap to what Pallavi and Misha said here, but the context is very important, right? There's no, you can't write a book on strategy versus tactical. You can, but it'll have to be very, very thick, covering a lot of scenarios, right? If you're a startup that's struggling for survival, you need something tactical and you need it fast, right? Whereas if you're uh, Google, Microsoft, these big companies that know you're going to survive into the next 3 decades, then you need strategy. If you don't have strategy, what happened to Nokia will happen to you, right? If you are not able to react, then it doesn't even matter. The strategy doesn't matter. So what I tend to do as an R&D leader is have transparent communication. You're right. There's sales, there's product management, there is marketing folks that also have input, kind of dictate how the product should look so that they can market it, right? All of this is going together. This is an organization. This is how software works. As long as we are all kind of transparent with each other, and the expectation is set, right? If sales, for example, comes and says there's a $10 million deal riding on this, as long as that's transparent and we can compare that to a $1 million kind of thing and decide where to invest, it's a business. It becomes simpler. Again, easier said than done, but open communication and very, very critical thinking, I would say. In the past, you could have things where you would sit and strategize, almost like PhD folks, right? You could research for years. Next year, the industry is going to be completely different. You guys know this, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind as far as timeline of strategy.
Rachel, thank you for that. I think you bring very wonderful aspects here. One is there is no clear definition of what is strategy. The company, the size of the company, the financial situation. If you are a startup, what is tactical, what is strategy? If you cannot pay the next month's salary for all the employees you are employing, what is tactical and strategy? That is one aspect. But you also indirectly brought in an aspect which I recognize. 10 years back, this tactical strategy discussion did not involve R&D at all. This was done between management, sales, and product management at most, if at all there was something called product management. And R&D was just getting directions as to, yes, go do this. Now I see more R&D getting involved in these conversations, questioning, understanding, and helping to even define what is tactical, what is strategy. This healthy questioning, understanding, coming right up to the developer level is a very important aspect you brought out. Though you did not point it out specifically, it came out in the way you answered it. Thank you very much for that. Lalitha, over to you. What perspective you want to bring into this aspect?
Yeah, you mentioned about the developer level, right? So I just want to add a bit on how, irrespective of what the company is thinking, right? Like Pallavi said, is it the revenue, or like Misha said, is it the outcomes, value outcomes that's coming in? Those could drive the direction, right? And also the mission of the company itself. Am I a services company or am I a product company? Am I just customizing things for one, particular big client who will fetch me a lot of revenue? All of these will drive the direction of the high level priorities. But when it comes to the developer, irrespective of any of these, my only message, what I want to share is that at the developer level, we can always think strategic. How you design and build the software can always be strategic. Like, you build a product, and like, you don't have to make it like so customizable that you end up with a menace at the end of it. You can build a product which is configurable instead, right? Give the power of configuration in the hand of the users, and then you don't end up with a complicated product. Like, the moment you build a product which is customizable heavily, then you have so many variants and so much of maintenance, so much of support to do. So that again is a tactical approach versus a strategic approach. It's like putting a band-aid is a tactical thing, or actually going down for a deep surgery and fixing the issue fully is a strategic approach. So I just wanted to share that perspective, that irrespective of the company's goals, could be at a developer level, when he or she is building the software, they can always think strategic on, what am I doing? Is it going to stay robust irrespective of how the strategy changes? So
That's a very important point, Lalitha. Thank you for that. The way the developers think, the architects think when they're designing, how reusable it is, how modular it is, and how we make it usable and less complex. These are very valuable points while building consumable technology. This takes us to a very interesting question. Lalitha, you indirectly mentioned the way we build it. We should try to reuse as much as possible. And many times while building consumable technology, we get into this mode of prototyping it, validating it, and all of that. And then once we validate the idea, that is when we come to realize, hey, the scaling aspect of it, we think of as an afterthought. And it's extremely difficult while building a consumable technology to estimate the scale in which it will get used. If we put too much effort onto the scaling, then we overbuild the product. If we don't factor scale into the design, then we probably have the very difficult decision of rebuilding the product for scale. We have seen this in various different aspects. So let us start this time from Misha. What does scale mean for you when we go towards customers? Customers have a poor sense, and you already touched upon Steve Jobs, and these customers don't know what they want, what scale they want. How do you translate these as requirements towards product management, towards R&D, and say, how do you think of scale, or you expect that it should scale so smoothly across small and big? What does scale mean to you?
Actually, I'd say in the term on the topic of scale, that does not apply, right? Customers know what scale they want to design for. If you take startups, their biggest funding is based on a large total addressable market. If you take customers that want to achieve big digital transformation outcomes using their existing or new investments in products, they will want it to be able to meet the scale, not just the scale, even the complexity of what they need to achieve. I'll give you a couple of examples here. One is of a very big hospital chain in India. They have some 10,000 beds where they admit patients, and some 45 odd hospitals. And this customer was very clear that whatever I do has to service this scale. And please don't come and tell me because it is this scale, you'll have to break down your systems into this, and that. He also said, I house my, where I'm hosting my application, that DC setup is inside my ICU. Why? Because then it gets an ICU status. I'm not dependent on generator backup separately. I'm not dependent on anybody else or whatever. And if my hospital information system goes down, that is hosted here, my doctors will not be able to attend to patients. So whatever you do, please keep this in mind. Also, he said, keep in mind that if you're going to give me recommendations on how I should architect something or how I should integrate something, which API should play a role here, or why something is doing something, please don't start judging my team as to why they develop the application like that or why they use something in a particular way. Please go and understand why they did it that like that, what was the circumstance, and how it can be fixed while. So it's a, spoke about the situation of fixing the plane while flying it. So it's not just at the start of product development, but it's also as you go along the journey that scale customers have in mind. So coming back to that, right? It's important to keep in mind again. In this case, I would say more than outcomes, also keep in mind the adoption. I'll give one more example. This is of a very big oil and gas company that we work with that is using cloud stack services to be able to actually analyze petrophysical data, to be able to analyze subterranean mapping rock, soil, etc., and decide what they want to do with certain terrains, what kind of businesses they can do from there, and reduce the time that they require to be able to analyze all of that information from years to hours. So I actually said that from years, from couple of years to couple of hours using technology. That's the scale and the complexity both that we are dealing with. And so I think that's where I loved how Rachil put it across. It has to be future fit always. And the same way as Lalita mentioned, that yeah, I really loved it. I'm going to use it a lot now. Is that you can always be strategic about it. Don't have to worry about the strategy versus tactics, but never forget the scale, because that is something customers don't forget, and they don't forgive you for not considering it.
Yeah, thanks, Misha. This is very valuable input. Pallavi, how do you look at scale? I think there is one question coming on the chat window saying one big customer wants a large scale, and there are so many other small customers who really, for them, the scale is so. Misha brought in the aspect of one customer knows what they clearly want. That is fine. But while we translate that as requirement into a product, the product is being built for multiple customers. So how do we deal with scale?
Yeah. I think Cisco being in the, I'll again, give only examples of what I know. Being in the industry for such a long time, we've had to deal with really large networks to really small networks. So, yes, I think one way to, whenever we design, whenever we look at certain hardware and software functionalities, we start with scale, and then you start with scale, and then you break it down into, yes, there are certain segments, small, medium, what we call commercial. These are the segments where they may not need these kind of scales, they may not need these kind of functionalities. Now, can we offer a scaled down version or a different type of product? But everything starts with scale, because that is the install base that we are looking at. Everything starts with high speed and throughput. That is the install base that that we're used to. But what has been very interesting of late is when you start talking about user experience, when you start talking about simplifying it for customers, um, we've seen both angles, right? People come in and say, oh, we need to make it really, really simple to use. People just have to click one thing or maybe two things in the workflow and be done with it. And what we've noticed is when you start doing that, people with higher scale and need for lack of a better word, complex workflow or functionality, lose out on this. That's where I think the balancing act is very much needed. And that's where we need to continuously work with both sides, engineering and people who use it. What Misha said, adoption. We need to iterate continuously and see what fits the middle ground, because complete simplification doesn't help. Obviously, highly complex doesn't help. Where do we find that middle ground when you think of scalability from a technology standpoint? So that is something that we're discovering of late and working through that, and it's a fantastic challenge to have.
Thanks, Pallavi. Thanks for that. I think you touched upon another aspect of segmenting the customers, which is what you were saying when you said
Yeah.
it's an enterprise and a consumer. And while we think of scale as stretching from zero all the way to infinity, that segmenting also plays a significant role in fitting it well to a particular category of customers. Lalitha, over to you. In the healthcare industry, how do you look at scale? What does scale mean to you?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the approach which has helped us is, take this path to start with as an MVP, right? A minimum viable product. That's where the segmentation of the clients comes into pictures. We have very kind of clients, like starting from small community hospital, PHCs, primary health care center, to the Veteran Affairs of the US and Department of Defense, right? So we have all of that. So definitely segmenting helps. So take this approach of MVP and then slowly build upon. But when we are building upon, the aspects of performance, security, and stability comes into picture. It can never be an afterthought. Even in the MVP, when you're building it, I think it has to be integrated with the design. I think that this is what helps you to scale. Another thing also, which is very common misbelief, I would say, is like, you just put it on the cloud, it will scale automatically. It's not going to happen. Right? That's something, the cloud might, may help you, provide you all the infrastructure, but if your application is not built to leverage that, it is not going to scale. So that's another aspect or dimension I want to bring in, that, when you're building a product, do not assume or believe that, the resources are limited, or there's going to be not availability of enough resources. So you build it in such a way that as the need increases, the resources will be available, the infrastructure will provide that, but the product should be able to consume that and scale up. I think all these aspects is what we keep in mind, when we build products for the healthcare IT.
Thanks a lot, Lalitha. So, I think you nearly stole my question for Rachil. I had a specific question for Rachil related to scale, of course. So, Rachil, cloud is supposed to be the panacea of all the problems related to scale, right? You can scale in, scale out, scale up, scale down. So, has the design and architecture of cloud made it really that simple that we can throw the scale problem onto a cloud and say, yes, we are done? What is your view of scale from developing a product?
From a engineering, R&D, SRE, DevOps, operational perspective, cloud has complicated our lives 1,000 times over. When you used to ship on-prem software, of course, you need to think about scale, stability, all of those factors there as well. But there was this sizing guidelines. You can set something up for the customer and say, this is what it can do. Again, to the point about scale from zero to infinity. Hey, you give it this much resources, this is what it does. In the cloud world, one of the biggest advantage of cloud or SaaS software is that the customer doesn't need to bother with this sizing. Yes, it is the provider that does that. So what I tell my developers, for instance, is in the on-prem world, 10 years ago, whenever we used to do this, you finish your coding for a release and then your party, right? Hey, the release has gone out. In the SaaS world, you finish your coding and then you stay awake at night, okay? Watching whether things are okay, whether it's going down. You can scale up, scale down. It takes tremendous amount of effort, tremendous amount of skill. Now, in the cloud world, the kind of adage is it's of course theoretical, so don't take it with a pinch of salt. But they say architect for 10 years, design for 5 years, and implement for a year, because your implementation has to change very rapidly as more customers adopt, if they adopt, right? Hopefully. But if the foundation is not laid out straight, for example, you talked about cloud software. Is a cloud software going to run in AWS, or it has to run in AWS, GCP, and Azure, right? That foundation, if you don't lay it, for example, you use so many AWS services because they're available, you have to pay a lot, but you use them, then it's hard to kind of migrate. That's a different kind of scale, scaling across regions, scaling across multiple availability zones and things like that. So the world has changed. Architects are paid very highly because of this skill, to be able to foresee something for 10 years down the line and lay the foundation. They can't predict when it will come, what will come, but the foundation, right? So that is one aspect. I also want to touch upon something that I think Pallavi mentioned, the usability kind of thing, right? It is very important for engineering to bring the entire cross-functional team together, PMs and every sales, everybody, right, leadership, into what the scale means. If I say I can scale 10 times more, number of customers, number of devices, whatever it is, right, however you define your scale, but there are some fundamental assumptions, right? Hey, it's gonna not gonna be okay. I'll exaggerate it. I can scale it 10 times, but 50% of the time the software is not going to be available. That's an exaggeration. Nobody will say that. But what about availability, right? And then, as far as usability is concerned, I use this term customer tolerance. Let's take Netflix. Let's say the entire world subscribes to Netflix, right? And they scale. Everybody is able to log in. Everybody is able to choose a movie. But when you play the movie, there's like 5 minutes lag, right? The video comes 5 minutes later, the audio comes. It's a very obvious kind of scenario, but these kind of things are very Netflix is an easy example. It's very important to define. Are your API latencies the same? Are they consumable? What does consumable mean? Should it be the same for the first customer and the 10,000th customer, or is there more tolerance, right? So factors like that in the modern kind of software development, it's way more complicated.
Sridhar, I need to add in here, because cloud was such, we've all heard it, since 10 years back, we've been hearing cloud. It's just a different implementation of what we used to do before. But what I'm increasingly noticing is you have these customers who went to cloud for scale, for so many other things. Now, for the same reasons, now they're taking two different approaches. I need something on-prem and I need something on the cloud. So it is, going back to what it was, but it's always that middle ground, right? As Buddha says, Madhyama Marga. So everything, you need to figure out what works for you and where do I, bring balance. So sorry, I couldn't control myself when he talked about those things.
No, it's very nice, this thing. And Rachil, thank you for that, the insight there. I also noticed that the theme of this Women Who Code Connect this time is about career. So while we talk of these things as problems or difficulties, it is also option for many people who are either trying to form their careers or switch careers. These kind of aspects, which are pain points, the way we describe it, are also opportunities for people to shape their career. If you are really a cloud expert and you are able to figure out how you can build across clouds, or as Pallavi, as you said, if you can build across an on-prem and a cloud version of the software, or to burst into the cloud, these kind of things are all, as we speak, we are uncovering new areas where people can concentrate and build their career out of.
Yeah, Sridhar, I mean, if you build software once and no scalability, no problems, a lot of us won't have jobs, right? These are great problems to have. You solve them and you build careers, and
we
this is
will
a great
ask
place
Misha
to be.
to close her ears, because she will not. She is going to bring. See, you are looking as a developer and a career aspect. I agree, but we still have to keep the customer in mind. So we still need to do the balancing act.
Yeah.
So, Neelam, I'm not seeing too many questions on the Q&A panel. So I'll take the liberty of asking one more question, if that's okay with you, Neelam.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure, Sridhar.
So, going back to the theme of this overall conference itself, the Women Who Code Connect event, how do we shape careers? So, and again, linking to the theme of today's topic, what is the role of AI/ML? There's a lot of buzz around AI/ML, and everybody says there's a whole lot of data digitization. There's a lot of wealth in data, and on the other side, there's a cost of building the intelligence out of the data while we build consumable technologies. How do we factor in this AI/ML aspect? Is AI/ML prime time, or is it still a marketing buzz? What is really happening? And again, Misha, I'll put you on the spot to go first. Give the customer view. What do customers think of AI/ML?
Yeah, Thanks, Sridhar. I think I was wanting to jump into this as well, and I've in the past seen this womenhood code community be very passionate about AI. So I'm hoping this will invoke some questions at least. Um, I think the observation that I have from the field is I'll take the example of one customer that we had, company by the name of Tanla, which is a communications platform as a service organization, and they provide these the cloud communication stack to telecom companies, right? Those SMSs that you get, which come in bulk from banks and from various transactions, they get routed through such stacks. They handle something like 200 billion communications annually. Okay, and they went ahead and set up their first blockchain-based platform for being that there was a regulation that came out that you need to have blockchain-enabled these SMSs to ensure authenticity of the communication that's happening. Um, it's a different thing. Microsoft worked with them to develop it, but the point here is that it's a good use of the blockchain technology. And I'd say where we use AI and ML, we should use it to solve the really difficult problems. Don't do it just for the sake of fancy. Okay, I want to put it on my resume, so I put it, because when there is enough, right? What they're saying is it's going to be an immersive, interconnected virtual world or whatever, with all the metaverse and everything coming in. There are real problems to solve. Get into it. The petrophysics example that I shared earlier is an example where obviously you need to use artificial intelligence. Cancer research is being done based on that. So solve some of those difficult problems. And I'll come back to one of my favorite ones that Rachil may not like, but it's about log ingestion. And I'll connect it to the cloud topic also that Pallavi and Lalita touched upon, right? We had this, and I won't name the customer, but we had this customer where they were ingesting a lot of logs to be able to do something. Okay, and why were they ingesting so many logs? And obviously they were ingesting it means they were loading it on the cloud and ingesting it to generate some analytics to be able to do something, and something which is confidential, so I won't share. But the point was that there's just too much of log ingestion happening, and so the cloud consumption is just increasing, costs are increasing. You just put it on the cloud for the heck of putting it on the cloud. But I wish that whoever designed the product had thought about, how can I build some AI into this so that when there is a situation of this kind, only the relevant logs are going to go into the relevant place? Because this is wasting time, this is wasting business critical, mission critical application support, this is affecting end customers and God knows what not, right? I'll stop there because we are short of time, but I love this topic.
Excellent, Misha. Thank you for that. Lalitha, you're
Yes.
next. I know AML is a huge topic in the healthcare space. How do you look at AML? Is it prime time? Can people build consumer technology, reliable technology, dependable technology using AML? What do you think?
Like Misha said, I really like what she mentioned, right? It has to solve a real life problem. It's not just a fancy thing you add on it. We use AML heavily in the healthcare technology, healthcare IT world, to add value to our existing products. Like we already have built products, right? And then actually AML can bring in, say, a decision support system. I'll give an example of we have, say, an X-ray viewer, and radiologists today have to go through that software, keep on endlessly keep watching X-ray after X-ray to diagnose the issue, that there is a fracture or a cancer or a tumor or whatever. So there is a radiologist fatigue that sets in. But we have built a kind of layer of AIML on top of the existing product, which actually tells the radiologist, right, that you have possibility, there is a 98% possibility or probability that this is a fracture in the knee or whatever, right? So the person doesn't have to spend so much time. It's a big value add that AML is bringing in here in terms of a decision support system. So AML has to be, I think, used only to solve real life problems and bring in the necessary value add for the clients. And there is a huge opportunity to do it. And the biggest example is the pandemic situation, which actually accelerated the clinical trials, right? All the clinical trials typically goes through 5-6 years of journey, and usage of AML there reduce the whole vaccination discovery process and compress the whole time. Right? There can be huge value addition that can come in, and but it has to solve a problem. It has to be a value add.
Thanks a lot, Lalitha. So Rachil, over to you. Uh, how advanced is AI ML from? What are the kind of skills people should develop, whether as part of developing a product or for upskilling themselves? How important is AI ML?
No, it is important. It's getting a lot of adoption. It's proving its worth. Both the areas, right, that were spoken about before this. It's like asking, is our computers useful, right? I'm sure people asked that many years ago. It's something that automates things, and AIML is something that automates something a human would do, right? If you have the lights off in a building, is the building being still monitored? Uh, as far as skill set, I'm sure people can find this. There's uh, a lot of things out there, deep learning. There are now courses that are specialized only for AI and ML, right? Especially the ML part of it. AI has been there for a few decades, right? There's uh, a lot of stuff to do. What I caution people as far as career is concerned is do look at study about it, right? And do look at areas where it'll be kind of useful to learn this. Nowadays, if they teach something in data science, some statistical analysis which has been around for like 2 centuries, the outcome they call it as ML, right? It really has to be learning. Can the machine actually learn? There's a lot of statistical analysis which are very useful, but those are not ML. So distinguish these things and look at it, right? The other thing that I want to say in general, not a whole lot to add in AML, I think it was covered very well, but is one thing that I see is innovation is now AML. If you're not doing AI or ML, you're not doing innovation, right? Solving a problem is not seen as innovation, or coming up with a good UX user experience is not seen as an innovation, right? Those are real customer problems. You don't have to do AML to do innovation. It's like uh, people say this innovation. This is what is happening, right? So the marketing buzz. The reason you're asking the question is a marketing buzz where everything is AML, whether it needs it or not, or it's done in a wrong manner, right? It's like, let's say you're going in for a heart surgery, or you're really nervous, right? You go in there and people tell you, hey, don't worry, this is a normal routine surgery, right? And then the surgeon comes in and the surgeon says, don't worry, sir or madam, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing, but you know what? I'm bored. I want to innovate today. And he cracks his knuckles right before you knock off. That's not something you want to hear, right? So it has its place, but it has to be used as a something in the right context. Right? Is what the caution that I have.
Thanks, Rachil. Pallavi, over to you. I have a. I know we are running out of time, so it's a 1-minute answer from you, Pallavi. I know Neelam is already appeared on the screen. So in the
No, I
context of
always say, go ahead.
yeah, so there is this acronym. I'm pretty sure you heard of it, AAA, right? People who want to be more honest about what AML is, they use this AAA: automation, analytics, and AI. So there you really separate out automation, because many companies think automation is AI. Many people think analytics, like Rachil told, this thing, the statistical analysis, they just put it under the umbrella of AI and say yes, they're doing AI. And then there is the real AI. Of course, there various techniques are there. So as a person who is strategizing to build products, how do you look at AI, the role of AI? Are customers intelligent enough to articulate AI requirements, or we as product managers would need to think about the AI use cases and then pass it on to engineering? How do you view out AI?
Yeah, I always say, when we talk about machine learning, I feel that it's an evolution. Humans are a result of constant learning and where we are. That's how I view it. And it's inevitable. We will evolve into that. We will evolve the creation of ours, which is the computer, into that. And when you look at network infrastructure, the customers are actually scared. When we talk about, and I'll give you a very simple example. If there is some, network always knows what's going on. If there is an issue, we tell the customer, hey, we can just detect an issue and tell you what's wrong and even clear it. Customers do not want that. So right now, I think we've gone to a stage of saying, here is an issue. Even though you can go to the next stage, because humans have to be ready for the machine to learn and tell them what to do. We will get there, but right now, I think we are at that, we're still very scared of that intelligence that's coming because there's no empathy and there are many other things that are lacking that we already have. But we will get there. It's an evolution.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pallavi. And I think we had the privilege of this wonderful panel and got a lot of expertise and insights into many of these aspects. So, Neelam, back to you.
Sridhar, there are two questions in the chat, if we can take that up.
Yeah,
One is
sure.
from Sandeep. If you want, I can take the question. I can
Yeah,
tell the
please,
question.
if you can read them.
Yeah, so the question is, how do you decide when is the product ready after beta test? How do you handle continuous demand for changes? So we are in agile mode, right? So it's continuously changing requirements. So how you take that up? So anyone who wants to take the question.
Yeah,
Rachel, you
I
want
am.
to take from
Yeah.
R&D?
Oh, yeah, I would like to have two views, Pallavi's view and Rachel's view on that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, PM and
Uh,
Rachel, yes.
yeah.
R&D.
So, I mean, product is ready when we say, here are the functionalities that are a must and we need it by X and Y, Z date. And now comes that was your waterfall method. And now comes the agile mode where we say, out of the 70%, I need these 40%, and let's go with what we call limited availability. And let's go test with customers and then start reiterating because off late it's people don't want to wait for the entire thing to be completely tested and be ready. And at the same time, you don't know the type of implementation adoption that's going on the customer side as well. Things are changing so fast. So it is ready when you, it's very simple. Define the success metrics and go against that. Rachel.
Sure. I think from engineering standpoint, um, there are various factors to consider, right? Tests, you mentioned beta testing in the question. That's one part of it, all this manual test, but test automation. If I say the product is ready and tomorrow I'm going to make a change to the product, can I guarantee that other things will not break, right? So that's one part of kind of readiness. Security is another aspect. Anything that we put out there should be bulletproof. So have you done, have you looked at common vulnerabilities, CVEs, what they call as? We use a lot of open source, right? All software users. Is there something you guys are familiar with the Log4j thing that happened? I believe, right? It was a disaster. So things like that are maybe things that maybe downstream folks or field folks might not care about, but or they care about, but they don't know, right? It's assumed that these things are there. From an engineering standpoint, it's our responsibility to ensure when we say things are ready, it's really ready, right? With the multiple aspects. On the continuous product development, again, it depends. At VMware, for instance, in the past, there used to be an entire division, right? Division meaning, 200, 300 people that for a product, for a big product, they used to do continuous product development. In my experience, what I have done is we started a product about 4 years ago from scratch, and there was no thought to continuous product development, right? Product development was continuous product development because we were so far behind on very bare features and all of that, right? Like table stakes kind of thing. But as we are maturing, what we are doing is we are forming, again, this goes to the tactical versus strategic thing, but we are forming this tactical team, and the tactical team is growing in size, right? Because customers are using it and new requirements come in, new issues come in, and uh, we can't keep working on the longer term and cool features. We need to run the products first.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Pallavi. I think you brought in both aspects of being ready for making changes, but making sure that the quality is and the criterias are not compromised when we taking these changes. So, Neelam, you had one more question. Do we have time, or what do you want to do?
Yeah,
I think we did
we
cover
should
that other one,
close.
right? How do you
Yeah,
balance
we
one big
covered the
customer?
other one.
We
Yeah.
covered, yeah. So
So,
we
Neelam,
can
if you can
close it
conclude
now.
this panel, yeah, sure.
Yes. So thanks everyone. It was a very interesting and insightful discussion, and I really enjoyed because I was able to see the R&D perspective also and the product management also. And I'm part of R&D, so I was able to connect to Rachel, Lalitha, and the PMs because from them we get the requirements. So which always changes. And Misha from the sales perspective. So that also. So I mean, it's a sandwich between the PM and engineering. Yeah. So PM is the sandwich between the customer and the engineering. So very insightful discussion. So I there are many key takeaways. So if I say a few of them, so first is the customer first. So you always think about the customer, why they want, what they want, and many customers, as Misha said, that they don't know what they want. So we have to show them the value which we are bringing by the features. So that is very big key takeaway. And what Rachel also said, that plan for the best but be ready for the worst. So that also I like the point that we should always plan for the best part. And the definition of consumable is changing from the first customer to the last customer. So as we grow, as the number of customers also changes, the definition of consumable also changes. So thanks a lot. Hope you all enjoyed this session, and thanks again. Have a nice
Always a
day.
pleasure to be here. All the best.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Thank you
everybody.
for the
Bye.
Thank you.
opportunity.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.